In the waning months of 1944, under the oppressive cloak of a moonless night in the Pacific Theater, a handful of American PT boats embarked on a mission that would defy conventional military wisdom and unsettle the meticulously calculated assumptions of Japanese air superiority. The setting was the volatile waters near the Philippine archipelago, where the Japanese Empire, despite mounting losses, still wielded formidable air power, approximately 800 fighter aircraft poised to enforce dominance over the sea lanes and coastal approaches. Against this overwhelming backdrop, the diminutive PT boats, often dismissed as mere nuisances by the Japanese command, were tasked with a seemingly Sisyphean objective: to disrupt Japanese air operations and supply lines, to puncture the armor of an air armada that was widely believed to be invincible. The operation was fraught with peril from the outset. These nimble vessels, no more than 80 feet in length, were to ply the treacherous waters under cover of darkness, their wooden hulls and compact frames offering scant protection against the ferocity of aerial bombardment and strafing runs. Yet, it was precisely this low profile and speed that would become their greatest asset. As the night deepened, the PT boats surged forward, engines thrumming, cutting through the ink-black sea with a daring born of desperation and resolve. The Japanese fighters scrambled in response, their pilots trained for aerial dogfights and large-scale bombing raids, not for the elusive dance of engagement that these small vessels would force upon them. Initial contact was nothing short of chaotic. The Japanese air armada, confident in its overwhelming numbers and superior firepower, unleashed wave after wave of fighters in an attempt to crush the PT boats' audacious incursion. However, the PT crews, well aware of their vulnerability, executed evasive maneuvers with deft precision. Employing a combination of zigzag courses, sudden bursts of speed, and leveraging the natural cover of the archipelago's jagged coastline, these vessels exploited every possible advantage. The Japanese pilots found themselves confounded by the boats' unexpected agility, their targeting solutions disrupted by the vessel's rapid and unpredictable movements. Lieutenant Commander James Jimmy A. Parker, commanding one of the lead PT boats, later recounted the bewilderment that rippled through his crew as they faced the onslaught. We knew the odds were against us, 800 fighters, a sea of metal and fire, but somehow, in the dark, we became ghosts. They couldn't pin us down. Every time they thought they had a bead, we slipped away. This sentiment encapsulates the paradox of the engagement. The seemingly insurmountable force was repeatedly outmaneuvered by a handful of determined, nimble vessels whose very existence was an afterthought in Japanese strategic calculations. The Japanese response fluctuated between frustration and disbelief. Air controllers, unable to accurately track the small, fast-moving targets, struggled to coordinate their fighters effectively. Pilots reported that the PT boats seemed to vanish into thin air, leveraging darkness and the complex geography of the islands to their advantage. The engagement stretched into the early hours of the morning, a grueling test of endurance for both sides. The PT boats' crews, operating under immense pressure, demonstrated extraordinary situational awareness and nerves of steel, maintaining communication and coordination despite the relentless attacks. This night operation shattered any illusions that the Japanese fighters could effortlessly dominate the naval theater. The sheer scale of the fighter force, close to 800 aircraft, should have guaranteed the obliteration of the PT boats. Instead, the narrative was inverted. The PT boats, small and vulnerable, became the hunted who, through a combination of audacity, tactical innovation, and sheer luck, turned the tables on their pursuers. The Japanese air armada, accustomed to dictating terms with overwhelming force, was forced into a reactive posture, unable to fully exploit its numerical advantage. The mission objectives of the PT boats were twofold: to interdict Japanese supply lines vital to sustaining their garrisons scattered across the Pacific, and to impose disruption on air operations by forcing Japanese fighters into defensive and erratic maneuvers. In this regard, the PT boats succeeded beyond expectations. Their presence compelled the Japanese command to divert resources and attention, diluting the effectiveness of their air patrols and creating pockets of vulnerability in their otherwise tight control of the skies and sea. Yet, the significance of this engagement extended beyond the immediate tactical outcomes. It exposed a critical vulnerability in Japanese naval air strategy, the over-reliance on overwhelming numbers and firepower at the expense of adaptability to unconventional threats. The PT boats' success was not the result of superior armament or armor but stemmed from their exceptional mobility and the ingenuity of their crews who refused to be cowed by unfavorable odds. Their ability to operate effectively under such conditions challenged the prevailing doctrine that small naval craft were negligible in the broader contest of air and sea dominance. The nighttime nature of the operation played a crucial role. Darkness, often seen as an ally to the attacker's stealth, became a double-edged sword. While it hindered Japanese visual targeting and coordination, it also demanded heightened skill and coordination among the PT crews, who relied on limited instrumentation and communication to navigate and engage. The success of these maneuvers underscored the importance of training and leadership. Lieutenant Commander Parker's leadership was instrumental. His calm under fire and tactical acumen inspired confidence and cohesion among his men, transforming a desperate gamble into a calculated strike. As dawn approached, the engagement drew to a close with the PT boats having inflicted disruption disproportionate to their size and firepower. While damage to Japanese air assets was limited, the psychological impact on Japanese command was profound. The notion that 800 fighters could easily overwhelm a handful of PT boats was proven spectacularly wrong. The Japanese military leadership, previously dismissive of the PT threat, was forced to reckon with the reality that these nimble vessels could exploit gaps in their air defenses and pose a persistent challenge. American war correspondents, seizing upon the dramatic narrative, lauded the PT boats' daring and resilience. Headlines extolled their devil-may-care tactics and a ghost-like maneuvers that confounded the Japanese air armada. However, beneath the veneer of propaganda lay the sobering truth of a battle where technology and numbers did not guarantee victory. The PT boats' success was a testament to human ingenuity and the unpredictable dynamics of warfare. This engagement near the Philippines, though a single episode in the vast Pacific conflict, encapsulated a broader theme of the war, that supremacy in one domain, air power, could be contested and undermined by unexpected forms of resistance and adaptation. The PT boats, often overshadowed by larger warships and aircraft carriers in popular memory, emerged from this night operation as symbols of tactical ingenuity and resilience. Their ability to outmaneuver 800 fighters was not merely a fluke but a demonstration of how small, agile forces could exploit the limitations of even the most formidable air armadas. In retrospect, the encounter stands as a vivid illustration of the unpredictable nature of combat, where assumptions of invincibility are frequently appended by the harsh realities of terrain, weather, human will, and technical limitations. The Japanese air armada, confident in its overwhelming superiority, found itself outmatched not by brute force but by the nimble vessels that danced just beyond their reach, slipping through the night with a deftness that would echo through naval history as a remarkable anomaly in the age of air dominance. The tactical prowess displayed by the PT boats during that fateful night near the Philippines was not merely a product of chance, but rather a calculated exploitation of their inherent design characteristics and the environmental conditions that enveloped the battle. These nimble vessels, though modest in size and armament, possessed a unique blend of speed, agility, and a low radar and visual profile that proved instrumental in confounding the Japanese fighters. The technical and tactical elements of their performance warrant a closer examination, for it is in these details that the true nature of their unexpected success is revealed. Primarily, the PT boats' exceptional speed, often exceeding 40 knots, allowed them to initiate rapid accelerations and abrupt directional changes that were difficult for the heavier and more cumbersome Japanese fighters to track and anticipate. Unlike aircraft engaged in high-speed dogfights, which generally operated in three-dimensional space with considerable freedom of movement, the PT boats were confined to the two-dimensional plane of the sea surface. Yet, paradoxically, this limitation became an advantage. Their ability to weave through narrow channels, exploit coastal topography, and utilize sudden bursts of speed created a dynamic and unpredictable target signature that frustrated enemy pilots accustomed to engaging larger, slower-moving naval vessels. Compounding this was the boat's low silhouette against the darkened backdrop of the sea at night. Japanese pilots, reliant on visual identification and targeting due to the limited sophistication of their airborne radar and fire control systems, found themselves grappling with a near-impossible task. The PT boat's wooden hulls absorbed radar waves to some extent, and their minimal superstructures reduced their detectability. Nighttime conditions further degraded the effectiveness of Japanese fighter targeting, as the interplay of moonlight, cloud cover, and the sea's reflective surface created illusions and false contacts. As one Japanese pilot later admitted in a debriefing, "We saw shadows, fleeting shapes, not the solid targets we expected. Trying to lock onto something that wasn't there was maddening." The PT crews took full advantage of these sensory and technical limitations. They employed evasive maneuvers that went beyond simple zigzags, integrating sudden stops, reverse movements, and coordinated feints designed to lure fighters into overcommitting their attacks and exposing themselves to countermeasures. The boats often operated in loose flotillas, maintaining radio silence or using brief coded bursts to coordinate their movements, ensuring that no single vessel became an isolated target. This networked approach increased their collective survivability, forcing the Japanese fighters to scatter their efforts and thereby diluting the impact of their numerical superiority. Environmental factors played a pivotal role as well. The archipelago's complex geography, with its myriad islands, narrow straits, and hidden coves, provided natural cover and escape routes. PT boats utilized these features expertly, slipping behind islands or disappearing into shallow waters where larger aircraft could neither pursue nor accurately target them. Weather conditions, often capricious and prone to sudden fog or rain squalls, further degraded Japanese pilots' situational awareness. The PT crews, trained extensively in night navigation and familiar with the local waters, transformed these challenges into tactical assets. The Japanese Air Command's difficulties were compounded by the nature of their fighter formations and patrol patterns. Operating large numbers of fighters in relatively rigid formations optimized for large-scale air combat, they were ill-suited to the fluid and fast-paced encounters demanded by chasing small, agile naval targets. The fighters' heavier armaments and fuel consumption profiles meant that prolonged chases were unsustainable, forcing pilots to break off engagements prematurely or risk running out of fuel. Moreover, the psychological strain of pursuing elusive targets under hostile night conditions eroded pilot effectiveness, leading to cautious and sometimes erratic attack runs that the PT boats exploited. Specific instances during the engagement illustrate these dynamics vividly. On one occasion, a PT boat under the command of Ensign Robert Hayes executed a daring maneuver where the vessel accelerated toward a narrow channel flanked by steep cliffs. Pursued by a flight of fighters attempting strafing runs, Hayes skillfully navigated the treacherous passage, using the terrain to shield his boat from direct fire. As the Japanese fighters attempted to reposition, they were forced to contend with unpredictable wind currents and the risk of collisions in the confined airspace, leading to aborted attacks and disengagement. The PT boats' crews also demonstrated remarkable adaptability in their use of on-board weaponry. While their primary armament, torpedoes and light machine guns, was insufficient to challenge the fighters directly, these weapons served as deterrents and tools for suppressive fire when necessary. The presence of machine gun nests and the occasional use of smoke generators created visual obstructions, further complicating Japanese targeting efforts. The boat's ability to lay smoke screens, especially under the cover of darkness, added an additional layer of protection, enabling coordinated withdrawals or repositioning without sustaining damage. This tactical ingenuity was not born simply from training, but emerged out of necessity and experience. Many PT boat crews had undergone rigorous exercises in evasive maneuvers and night operations, knowing full well their vulnerability against larger warships and aircraft. Their success in this engagement underscored the value of flexible, decentralized command structures that empowered junior officers and enlisted men to make split-second decisions tailored to evolving battlefield conditions. Lieutenant Commander Parker's earlier emphasis on initiative and situational awareness cascaded down the chain of command, fostering an environment where individual skill complemented collective strategy. From a broader perspective, the PT boat's evasion tactics challenged conventional naval doctrine that prioritized heavily armed and armored vessels supported by air cover as the primary means of sea control. The Japanese, with their emphasis on overwhelming air power and large fleet actions, were unprepared for an adversary that leveraged speed, stealth, and terrain familiarity to offset their firepower advantage. The result was a tactical paradox. The smaller, seemingly less significant units imposed disproportionate attrition and disruption simply by refusing to conform to expected engagement patterns. Japanese pilots, reflecting on the encounter, expressed a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. One veteran noted, "We trained to dominate the skies and crush enemy fleets, but these boats were ghosts. They forced us to fight a different kind of battle, one that tested our patience and skill in ways we hadn't expected." This acknowledgement, while rare in official Japanese accounts, highlights the underestimation that plagued their approach and the tactical lessons that would influence subsequent operations. In sum, the PT boat's success was a convergence of design advantages, environmental exploitation, and tactical innovation. Their speed and agility allowed them to outpace and outmaneuver fighters optimized for aerial combat rather than maritime pursuit. Their low profile and use of darkness diminished the efficacy of Japanese targeting systems. Their crews' adept use of terrain, weather, and coordinated maneuvers transformed the engagement from a lopsided contest into a dynamic and unpredictable encounter. The evasion tactics employed were not mere improvisations but demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of the interplay between technology, environment, and human factors on the battlefield. This episode stands as a compelling counterpoint to the prevailing narrative of Japanese air invincibility during the late stages of the Pacific War. The PT boats, through their unexpected agility and tactical acumen, exposed the limitations of overwhelming numbers and raw firepower when confronted with nimble, adaptive adversaries. Their performance not only disrupted Japanese operations during that critical night but also laid the groundwork for a re-evaluation of how small naval units could be integrated into broader maritime strategies, challenging the dominance of traditional doctrines predicated on size and force concentration. The repercussions of that nocturnal confrontation reverberated swiftly through the corridors of Japanese military command, eliciting a mixture of incredulity and unease that challenged deeply ingrained assumptions about our superiority and naval dominance. The unexpected resilience and effectiveness of the American PT boats against an overwhelming force of nearly 800 fighters not only disrupted immediate operational plans but also sowed seeds of doubt within the strategic calculus of the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Service. This episode, while tactically limited in scope, carried significant cultural and military implications that extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. Japanese command structures, conditioned by years of early successes predicated on numerical and technological superiority in the air, struggled to reconcile the disparity between expectation and reality. The doctrine that had long held sway, one that placed supreme confidence in the ability of massed fighter formations to control the skies and neutralize naval threats, was suddenly called into question. Reports filtering back from the engagement painted a picture of PT boats that were not the hapless targets they had assumed but rather elusive adversaries capable of frustrating and evading concentrated fighter attacks with alarming regularity. Within the Japanese military hierarchy, this translated into a palpable sense of disbelief. Senior officers, accustomed to viewing small surface craft as negligible in the face of air power, found themselves forced to reconsider the threat posed by these nimble vessels. Memoirs and post-war analyses reveal a tone of grudging respect mingled with frustration. One senior Japanese naval officer noted, "We had always underestimated these PT boats, believing them to be little more than irritants. Yet, their ability to evade our fighters and disrupt our operations was a bitter lesson in humility." The Japanese propaganda apparatus, tasked with maintaining morale and projecting strength, faced a delicate balancing act. On one hand, official reports downplayed the significance of the PT boats' success, attributing their survival to luck or minor tactical errors rather than any fundamental flaw in Japanese air strategy. On the other hand, the need to maintain an image of invincibility forced a degree of obfuscation and selective reporting. This duality produced a narrative that sought to minimize the PT boats' achievements without entirely dismissing their disruptive impact, a subtle form of damage control aimed at preserving confidence both at home and on the front lines. Conversely, American media and military communiques seized upon the engagement as a symbolic victory that transcended its immediate tactical outcomes. The PT boats were lionized as emblematic of American ingenuity and daring, their success framed as a David versus Goliath story that resonated with a war-weary public. Headlines extolled their ghost-like maneuvers and devil-may-care tactics, casting them as underdog heroes who had managed to outwit a seemingly unbeatable foe. This narrative, while infused with the hyperbole typical of wartime reportage, nonetheless captured a kernel of truth. The PT boats had punctured the myth of Japanese air invincibility, at least temporarily. The engagement forced a re-evaluation within Japanese strategic circles concerning the deployment and protection of their air assets. The assumption that overwhelming fighter numbers alone would guarantee control of contested waters was undermined by the evident vulnerability to agile, small-scale naval threats. This realization prompted discussions on modifying patrol patterns to better account for low-profile targets and integrating anti-PT boat measures more explicitly into air defense doctrines. However, these adaptations came belatedly and with mixed results, hampered by resource constraints and the broader strategic deterioration facing Japan in late 1944. The cultural dimension of this reassessment is equally significant. The Japanese military ethos, steeped in notions of honor, superiority, and inevitability of victory, found itself challenged by an encounter that underscored the unpredictability and complexity of modern warfare. The PT boat's ability to disrupt and evade was not just a tactical inconvenience, but a symbolic affront to the carefully constructed narrative of Japanese martial supremacy. This cognitive dissonance manifested in a range of responses, from dismissive skepticism among some commanders to a more reflective acknowledgement among others that adaptability and humility were requisite virtues. Moreover, the engagement highlighted the limitations of Japanese air power beyond mere numbers and technological capability. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots, who faced the frustration of chasing elusive targets under hostile conditions, cannot be overstated. Pilot testimonies reveal a sense of demoralization and fatigue, compounded by the realization that their formidable air armada was not as invulnerable as previously believed. This erosion of confidence, though subtle, contributed to a gradual shift in operational effectiveness and morale. From the American perspective, the encounter reinforced the value of integrating small, agile naval units into broader operational frameworks aimed at leveraging their unique strengths against larger, more cumbersome adversaries. The PT boat's success validated doctrines that emphasized flexibility, surprise, and the exploitation of environmental and technological asymmetries. Their audacious tactics became case studies in naval warfare schools, inspiring future generations of commanders to reconsider the role of small craft in contested maritime environments. The Japanese military's initial underestimation of the PT threat serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of complacency and rigid doctrinal adherence. The assumption that air superiority equated to uncontested control of the sea was revealed as an oversimplification, one that failed to account for the multifaceted nature of combined arms engagements. The PT boats exploited this blind spot with devastating effect, transforming from marginal nuisances into strategic irritants that compelled a recalibration of tactics and resource allocation. While the Japanese command attempted to adapt, their efforts were constrained by the broader strategic context, dwindling industrial capacity, attrition of experienced pilots, and the relentless advance of Allied forces across the Pacific. These systemic pressures limited the scope and effectiveness of any tactical adjustments, rendering the PT boat's disruption more impactful than it might have been in a different operational environment. In essence, the engagement exposed a fault line in Japanese military thinking, revealing the vulnerability of even a numerically superior and technologically advanced force when confronted with unconventional tactics and agile adversaries. The PT boats, through their tenacity and tactical innovation, forced a re-evaluation that transcended the immediate conflict, challenging the mythos of Japanese dominance and prompting strategic introspection that, while belated, acknowledged the evolving nature of naval warfare. This episode stands as a testament to the complexity of war, where perception and reality often diverge, and where the underdog's unexpected success can ripple through cultural, military, and strategic domains with lasting effect. The Japanese reaction to the PT boat's performance encapsulates this dynamic, oscillating between denial, adaptation, and reluctant respect, a microcosm of a war increasingly defined by shifting paradigms and the relentless contest of wills and ingenuity. The tactical shockwaves delivered by the PT boat's unexpected performance spurred a substantive re-evaluation of naval doctrine and operational planning on both sides of the Pacific conflict, prompting adaptations that echoed through subsequent engagements and strategic posturing. For the American forces, the success was not merely a fleeting moment of tactical brilliance but a catalyst for refining and expanding the role of PT boats within the larger framework of combined arms operations. Likewise, the Japanese military, grappling with the unsettling reality of their vulnerability to small, agile vessels, undertook modifications in fighter patrol patterns and anti-PT boat countermeasures, albeit constrained by the attritional pressures that marked the late stages of the war. American naval leadership, recognizing the unique advantages conferred by the PT boat's speed, agility, and stealth, began to place greater emphasis on hit-and-run tactics designed to maximize disruption while minimizing exposure to overwhelming air and naval firepower. The doctrine evolved to prioritize rapid strikes against supply lines, reconnaissance, and coordinated engagements that leveraged support from Allied air assets. This synergy between PT boats and aircraft marked a departure from earlier practices, underscoring the necessity of integrating diverse platforms into a cohesive operational mosaic capable of exploiting enemy weaknesses. These tactical shifts manifested in more aggressive patrol schedules, with PT boats operating in concert with fighter and bomber escorts to create layered threat environments that confounded Japanese defensive efforts. The utilization of intelligence from aerial reconnaissance further refined targeting and timing, enabling PT crews to strike with precision and withdraw before the enemy could mount an effective response. The evolution of communication protocols, incorporating secure and rapid transmissions, enhanced coordination and situational awareness, empowering PT boat commanders to adapt swiftly to dynamic battlefield conditions. On the Japanese side, the realization that their existing fighter patrol patterns were ill-suited to counter the elusive PT threat prompted a series of adjustments aimed at closing the gaps exploited by these nimble vessels. Fighter squadrons were redeployed to adopt more dispersed and flexible formations, with an increased emphasis on low-altitude patrols designed to detect and engage small surface targets. Additionally, there was a concerted effort to develop specialized tactics and training focused on anti-PT boat operations, including strafing runs optimized for fast-moving, low-profile targets and coordination with naval gunfire to trap and neutralize the boats. The Japanese also explored technological enhancements, such as improved radar and targeting systems, seeking to overcome the limitations that had hampered their ability to detect and track PT boats under challenging conditions. However, these initiatives often suffered from the constraints of resource scarcity and the deteriorating industrial base, limiting their widespread implementation and efficacy. Consequently, while adjustments were made, they were insufficient to fully mitigate the threat posed by the PT boats, who continued to exploit the persistent vulnerabilities in Japanese air and naval coordination. The broader impact of this tactical and operational re-evaluation extended to naval warfare strategies on both sides, challenging entrenched doctrines that favored large fleet engagements and air superiority as the sole determinants of maritime control. The PT boat's success illuminated the potential of small, agile craft to disrupt supply chains, gather intelligence, and impose asymmetric costs on superior forces. This recognition fostered a more nuanced appreciation of maritime power, one that acknowledged the complementary roles of diverse platforms and the importance of adaptability in the face of rapidly evolving threats. For the Allies, the integration of PT boats into combined arms operations served as a precursor to modern naval doctrines that emphasize flexibility, networked warfare, and the exploitation of technological and tactical asymmetries. The lessons learned from these engagements informed the development of doctrines that valued speed, stealth, and precision strikes, elements that would become hallmarks of naval strategy in the post-war era. The PT boats, once relegated to peripheral roles, emerged as critical components in a layered defense and offense system capable of challenging even numerically superior adversaries. Conversely, the Japanese experience underscored the pitfalls of over-reliance on traditional concepts of numerical superiority and rigid operational structures. Their attempts to adapt were hampered not only by material shortages but also by doctrinal inertia and a reluctance to fully embrace unconventional tactics or decentralize command. The resulting vulnerabilities were exploited not only by PT boats but by a range of Allied innovations, contributing to the progressive erosion of Japanese naval and air power as the war advanced. The operational re-evaluation also had profound implications for training and leadership development. The success of the PT boats highlighted the importance of empowering junior commanders and crews with the autonomy to make rapid, context-driven decisions. This decentralization fostered a culture of initiative and innovation, enabling PT boat units to adapt to the fluid and often chaotic nature of naval engagements. In contrast, the more hierarchical and rigid Japanese command structures struggled to respond with comparable agility, underscoring the interplay between organizational culture and battlefield effectiveness. Moreover, the engagement precipitated changes in logistical and support frameworks. Recognizing the increased operational tempo and risk exposure of PT boats, American naval planners enhanced maintenance, resupply, and repair capabilities in forward areas, ensuring sustained deployment and readiness. These logistical improvements were critical in maintaining the momentum of PT operations and extending their reach into contested waters. In sum, the tactical success of PT boats against overwhelming Japanese fighter forces catalyzed a multifaceted adaptation process that reshaped naval operations in the Pacific. For the Allies, it validated the strategic value of integrating small, agile units into coordinated strike and reconnaissance roles, leveraging their unique advantages to counterbalance enemy superiority in numbers and firepower. For the Japanese, it exposed the limitations of their existing doctrines and forced a belated, though constrained, effort to develop countermeasures that could address the asymmetric threat posed by PT boats. This period of operational re-evaluation reflects the dynamic and iterative nature of warfare, where each encounter serves as both a test and a lesson, compelling belligerents to refine tactics, technologies, and doctrines. The PT boats' role in this process, though often overshadowed by larger-scale battles and more glamorous hardware, exemplifies the profound impact that small, well-employed forces can have in altering the strategic landscape. Their maneuvers and the subsequent adaptations they inspired underscore a fundamental truth of naval warfare: agility, innovation, and the ability to exploit enemy vulnerabilities can, under the right conditions, triumph over sheer numbers and conventional might. In the aftermath of the audacious night engagement near the Philippine archipelago, where a handful of PT boats defied overwhelming odds by outmaneuvering nearly 800 Japanese fighters, historians and veterans alike have grappled with the true significance of this encounter. The event, often relegated to the periphery of Pacific War narratives, reveals deep insights into the nature of naval warfare, the limitations of air power, and the enduring legacy of small, agile units challenging dominant forces under extraordinary conditions. Post-war assessments have consistently underscored the tactical ingenuity and resilience of the PT boat crews, recognizing that their success was not a mere anomaly but a demonstration of how adaptability and human determination can offset material disadvantages. The boat's capacity to operate effectively in hostile environments, utilizing speed, stealth, and intimate knowledge of local geography, challenged prevailing assumptions about the primacy of our superiority in maritime conflict. Scholars have noted that this episode punctured the myth of Japanese air invincibility, revealing vulnerabilities that larger, slower vessels and even fighter formations had failed to exploit. Veterans from both sides recount the engagement with a mixture of surprise and respect. Lieutenant Commander James Parker, whose leadership was instrumental during the operation, reflected years later, "We were the underdogs in every sense, small boats, limited firepower, facing an armada of fighters. Yet, our crew's skill and sheer will turn the tide in those dark hours." It was a lesson in how the unexpected can reshape battlefields. His words encapsulate the broader sentiment among American PT boat veterans, who viewed the encounter as a defining moment that validated their training and sacrifice. Japanese veterans, too, have expressed a reluctant acknowledgement of the PT boat's impact. In post-war interviews, several pilots described the frustration of engaging targets that seemed to vanish into the night, admitting that the boat's agility and tactics had forced them to rethink their approach to air and naval coordination. This grudging respect, however, was tempered by the broader strategic decline faced by Japan in late 1944 and 1945, which overshadowed localized tactical lessons with the grim realities of industrial and manpower attrition. The legacy of the PT boat's unexpected success extends beyond individual recollections. Military historians highlight the engagement as a case study in asymmetric warfare, illustrating how smaller, less equipped forces can leverage innovation and environmental factors to challenge dominant powers. The episode influenced post-war naval doctrine, particularly in the United States, where the integration of fast attack craft into combined arms operations became a hallmark of Cold War maritime strategy. The lessons learned informed the development of missile boats, patrol craft, and special operations vessels designed to exploit speed and surprise in littoral zones. Furthermore, the engagement serves as a poignant reminder of the unpredictability inherent in warfare. The Japanese air armada, confident and numerous, anticipated an easy victory, only to encounter nimble adversaries whose tactics confounded expectations. This dynamic underscores the limits of relying solely on numerical superiority and technological advantages without accounting for the ingenuity and resolve of opponents. It also highlights the critical importance of flexibility in command structures and the empowerment of junior leaders capable of adapting to rapidly changing conditions. From a broader historical perspective, the PT boat's performance during this night operation challenges monolithic narratives that emphasize large-scale battles and strategic bombing campaigns as the sole determinants of victory in the Pacific. Instead, it brings to light the cumulative effect of smaller, tactical engagements that, while less heralded, cumulatively eroded Japanese capabilities and morale. The boat's ability to disrupt supply lines and impose operational costs contributed to the broader Allied strategy of attrition and island hopping, which ultimately paved the way for Japan's defeat. The cultural resonance of the PT boat's daring exploits continues to inspire naval personnel and historians alike. Their story embodies themes of courage, innovation, and the triumph of the underdog, elements that resonate deeply within military traditions and popular imagination. The vivid accounts of crews slipping through the night, evading waves of fighters, and striking with precision evoke a dramatic tableau that transcends technical analysis, touching on the human dimension of warfare. In the final analysis, the engagement near the Philippines stands as a testament to the complex interplay of technology, tactics, leadership, and environment in shaping combat outcomes. It reminds us that even in an era dominated by mighty aircraft carriers and vaster fleets, the nimble and determined can carve out space for success against daunting odds. The PT boat's legacy endures not only in the annals of naval history, but in the enduring lesson that adaptability and resolve remain indispensable weapons in the arsenal of warfare.